Coming into the series finale of Transformers Prime, if you don't count the movie, the episode Deadlock, we again pick up basically exactly where the previous episode ended up. Despite Ratchet's efforts to lay a false trail, the Decepticons have managed to stabilize synthetic energon, giving them the ability to create cyber matter to fuel their cyberlock and cyberform planets, including Earth and Cybertron, and they plan to start with Earth, destroying the humans who already live there. So the Autobots cannot allow them to do that. Optimus, since he's already nearby, attacks the ship from the outside, while the others bridge into the ship, where Megatron and his remaining forces, after Predaking's rampage, stand ready to hold the line until after they can fire off the lock and destroy the planet which has given them so much grief during their time there. In fact, it even seems like Megatron would be satisfied enough just destroying Earth, as revenge for all of the various wrenches that the humans have thrown into the machinery of his various schemes. And despite the fact that Optimus intends to do everything in his power to prevent this second Omega Lock from being destroyed so that they can restore Cybertron, it does look for a little while like they're going to have to make the ultimate sacrifice and destroy this Omega Lock too. This episode picks up with the battle having already started. Megatron stands against Optimus while wielding his Dark Starsaber, whereas Optimus doesn't have his Starsaber. That's in the possession of the Decepticons. And maybe the Dark Starsaber is weaker here than it's supposed to be, maybe because Megatron doesn't have the arm of a Prime anymore. Because Optimus takes 2 hits from that thing in this episode, from its sword beam. And, like, he doesn't die, so that's really the only excuse I can come up with for why that's the case. So I'm just going to roll with that. And he takes the first of them here at the start of the episode, losing the wings on one side, so he no longer has the ability to fly. But he does make it to the Omega Lock superstructure on the outside of the Nemesis, so that he can attempt to hold it from the Decepticons. Meanwhile, the Wreckers attempt to take the bridge, while RC leads a stealth squad to try to take the lab where the Omega Lock is being controlled from. A lab that Ratchet has already reached, where he is fighting against Shockwave, one-on-one, and actually managing to hold his own well enough to keep Shockwave at least partially distracted. And this is where the episode gets actually really brilliant. Like, there's stuff in this episode that I don't like, and I'm going to talk about that, but this episode pays off so many things so well. I mentioned that recently we were given some time with the humans again, and it's clear looking at this episode why that was the case. They needed to remind us that the humans exist because they were going to do something here, and boy am I glad that they did. I am so glad that with Raph doing tech stuff back in the base, and Jack and Miko's contribution to this episode, all 3 of the core human characters have something to do, have something to contribute to this finale. And that Jack, in the end, gets to prove how competent a leader and a warrior he actually is. Because when the Wreckers fail to take the bridge because Soundwave is doing that portal people to less advantageous positions thing that he does, Jack has a realization. He remembers suddenly that while the Decepticons have an army, he has a Miko. Having Raph bridge him and Miko in her armor onto the Nemesis bridge, baiting the Soundwave to try to portal them away too, at which point Jack has Raph open another portal in proximity to Soundwave's portal, trapping Soundwave in that weird shadow dimension thing. Like, what a callback. We haven't seen that thing forever. And then using Miko's help with her greater size and the armor, Jack is able to secure the bridge where the Wreckers couldn't and get control of the ship. Meanwhile, the impulsiveness and the artifact hunter mindset of Smokescreen pays off here too, where after seeing Megatron with the Dark Starsaber, he has the idea to run off with his phase shifter and find the Nemesis vault and recover the Starsaber, something that is not on mission, but is absolutely the right choice in this situation. Finally, that attitude of his pays off for the positive, definitively. And for just a second, with him carrying this embodiment of Optimus's connection with the Matrix to Optimus to try to rearm him so that he has a better chance against Megatron, it seems as if they're going to pick up his arc as a stand-in, a modern update of Hot Rod from the G1 cartoon. That either they're going to go the route of Hot Rod giving the Matrix back to Optimus at the end of that show because he wasn't ready for it yet, or they're going to have Smokescreen in some way wield the Starsaber against Megatron to help Optimus, completing his journey and cementing him as a potential future leader of the Autobots. But instead, they do something that's fine. I just don't love it. Literally, at the last minute, Smokescreen loses his grip on the sword and literally passes this figurative torch to Bumblebee, who picks it up and leaps down to deliver it, getting shot in the process and falling into the pool of cyber matter that's building in the center of the Omega Lock. This causes Optimus to get a second wind in his fight against Megatron, but he fights recklessly in his grief and is hit by that second sword beam from the Dark Starsaber, leaving him in a position where Megatron is going to be able to finish him off, only for, of course, because he fell in cyber matter, for Bumblebee to come out of the cyber matter fully restored, pick up the Starsaber, and run Megatron through with it. And I absolutely know what they were going for here. Because Ratchet helped make this cyber matter, and Bumblebee, after being exposed to it, comes out with his voice intact. Which means that finally, Ratchet was able to fix Bumblebee's voice box. And also, Megatron is the one who destroyed Bumblebee's voice in the first place. So Bumblebee gets his revenge by being the one to kill Megatron. But it is so clear that they were trying to do more with this. That they were trying to take that fact that they turned Smokescreen into an XP in this show for Hot Rod, to telegraph their intention to turn Bumblebee into the next leader of the Autobots in this continuity. And I'm sorry, but Smokescreen is a strong enough character in and of himself that they should not have used him in this way. It was very disrespectful to the character. And I want to reiterate, I don't have an issue with them using Bumblebee as the XP for Hot Rod instead, and making him the next leader of the Autobots. From what I understand, Bumblebee becoming effectively the next leader of the Autobots is one of the better elements of the sequel series to this one, Transformers Robots in Disguise. Like, obviously a character named Smokescreen, who is really not Smokescreen. I've talked about this before too. He's clearly supposed to be Hot Rod in everything but name. Clearly he does not automatically deserve that storyline. It's just they set him up for it so hard, only to abandon it, just to pick it up for a second here in order to pass it off to Bumblebee. So why didn't they just give it to Bumblebee from the start? At about the time that they brought in Smokescreen, why didn't they instead just start to give this stuff to Bumblebee? Is it because he didn't have a voice and it would have made it hard for him to have scenes with the other characters that progress the story? Like, that's literally the only reason I can think of. In which case, even though him getting his voice restored here at the end was very powerful and fit very well within the events of this episode, I'm not going to say it didn't, give him his voice back earlier and start this arc for him earlier. Or just don't start it until here. One or the other. Don't stomp on another perfectly good character and fake us out regarding what arc he's going to get in order to facilitate this. It ends up souring what is otherwise an extremely poetic and appropriate ending to this conflict. But I guess in an episode which is paying off all kinds of other threads laid throughout the course of this series, it makes sense for it to pay off the crapping on Smokescreen thread too. I just wish it hadn't. That said, I will fully admit that this is mostly just a me thing. Like, I'm sure I care about this way more than most fans of this show do, because this is a fantastic ending. Like, on paper, and the way it's animated, and the way it's voice acted, it's a fantastic ending. Even I can see that, regardless of the few issues that I have with it. And I absolutely adore that they managed to find time at the end of this episode after the action is concluded for the Autobots to fly the Nemesis back to Cybertron and shoot all of the cyber matter that they have on hand at the core of the planet and restore it before the episode's over. They don't just assure us that that's a thing that's going to happen off screen. I also love that they set up the futures of these characters. All of the Autobots, save for Ratchet, who decides to stay and work with Fowler's group, are going back to Cybertron to start to rebuild, and the 3 kids are provisional members of Fowler's team. So even if we never see them again, and I honestly don't think we do, maybe we do in RID, I just haven't seen it, but I haven't seen a lot of RID yet, so who freaking knows. But even if we never see them again, we have an idea of what they're going to be doing. And that's super cool. It's exactly what they should be doing, given the experiences that they've had. And we get brief, perfectly in character goodbyes between the 3 humans and their Autobots. They're super quick, but they pack a ton of emotional weight, and I feel like if they had gone on any longer than they did, it would have cheapened the experience. And we even get confirmation that the stunned Predaking did manage to hold on to the Nemesis after being thrown out of it by Megatron, and so he's on Cybertron too, setting up the TV movie, which serves as the really for truly proper finale of the show. And considering how well this episode wraps everything up, I feel I have to take a second to reflect on the series as a whole. Something that I wasn't sure I was going to do when I started recording this, because it has been a very uneven show. But if we take this episode as a blueprint to reverse engineer which plot threads they really cared about most, I think all of the plot threads that specifically pay off here, up to and including Starscream trying to avenge Megatron at the cost of his own life after Megatron is felled, and Knockout realizing being a Decepticon sucks and staying with the Autobots at the end in an attempt to join up with them, something that, like, I wouldn't have guessed, but, like, looking back, makes sense as an ending for his character, frankly. All of it, I think, is really strong. There are definitely plot threads in this show that don't pay off well or don't really go anywhere, but overall, Prime is a quality show. Its weaknesses may be aggravating, but its strengths are just spectacular. And if you're looking for a Transformers show that takes the themes and elements of the original show and really runs with them in a serious and structured way, you can't do better than this show. There are other Transformers shows that have different specific stories to tell and different specific tones that they're going for that I think do their job just as well as this one does. Like the most recent Transformers show, Earthspark, I think is actually a really strong show, but it is a very different Transformers show than this one is, with very different themes. This one, it had the difficult job of balancing all of the things that people expect from a quote-unquote proper Transformers show, and despite some hiccups, I feel like it did its job about as well as anyone could have expected. Possibly even better, at least from time to time. And I'm going to go ahead and spoil some of my thoughts on the movie a little bit, but even though I enjoy the movie and I don't mind it as an ending to the show, I almost kind of wish the show had ended here. I almost think that this is the superior ending to this story. The tapestry that it weaves this show into really is just that good. In fact, considering that this is a show with a movie that is technically set after its continuity ends, I kind of feel like I need to compare it to another show in a similar situation that I've also reviewed here on this channel, that being Teen Titans, as a means of kind of explaining why I have such mixed feelings about that movie, as kind of a preview of my thoughts on that movie coming in my next review. Teen Titans ended on a very weak note. Its finale was, I think, quite bad and did a very bad job of following up on the themes of the series and wrapping anything up. And so even though the TV movie that was set after that show's continuity kind of just felt like a particularly long extra episode of the show, it was a welcome pretty long extra episode of the show, because it allowed the show to end on a note that wasn't that finale episode. And so even though the TV movie for this show that's set after its main continuity also kind of feels like a particularly long extra episode of the show, I don't know, I feel like we needed it less than Teen Titans did, if that makes sense. But again, we'll talk about that in more detail in my review of that I will not be recording today along with all of this other stuff. So hopefully my face will be a little less swollen by then, and I'll be able to record in front of the camera again. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. As per usual, though, guys, and for the last time within the confines of this show's main series, what did you guys think of this episode of Transformers Prime? And what do you think of the Transformers Prime main series in general, overall? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who you think would enjoy my content, subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out the various links in the description of this video, including links to my first 2 novels, both of which are available for purchase. In the meantime, though, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.